Thank you very much, Mims. It's a real privilege to be here. Yeah, I'm going to follow roughly the kind of outline of the three questions that were sent over, and the first one is being, what messages are you giving to boys in schools that you visit? And I think it's important for our organisation to start with some honesty, which would be that when I first started solely doing this stuff as an individual before I launched Empath in 2017, 18, 19. The approach that we took, that I took, was based upon an understanding of the issues that were out in the ether at that time, which were very much focused around men's impacts on XYZ. And it became clear to me as an individual quite quickly that that wasn't having cut through with boys. That what I was getting was a lot of pats on the back and cheers from the girls and the female teachers, and the boys and the male teachers were not really engaging. So 2020, I started training as a psychotherapist, and that completely altered my perception of how we engage men and boys in this discussion, and started to do a lot more deeper research into the field and understanding the kind of psyche of men and boys, and really started to change the tack, which is to meet men and boys. And this is kind of Tony Porter from A Call to Men in the US. This is his mantra, which is meeting boys where they are at. And where boys are at generally is right now, they feel like they have been ignored a lot by a lot of the interventions that are happening in culture and society. They feel like they are of less importance, that their problems are of less importance. So what we do and here's just an example of how we kind of reframe. As an organization, what we say is, at the moment, we are talking rightly using the language of there being an epidemic against violence against women and girls in society. And we agree with that. We think there's far too much of it. What we say is yes, and if we use that sort of rhetoric, we have to start using rhetoric that there is a pandemic of violence against men and boys, because men and boys are far more likely to experience violence than women and girls. Now, that's not to say that the violence against women and girls isn't important, because it is. It's just that we need to engage the boys somehow. And a way to engage the boys is to say, well, actually, you're most likely to be the victims of violence. You're also far more likely to be the perpetrators of violence. So to say to the boys, this is about you. And I know that as soon as you use the word feminism or patriarchy, the boys just go la, 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 and switch off. So we're very careful with the sort of language that we use with boys, because, of course, we are talking about equalities discourse at its core, but we have to be very careful with how we engage boys, because what I say to the Empath is now, a team of 6, and the head of education, Will Adolphi, who you may have seen was in the Movember documentary that has just come out, talking about his experience of the manosphere. If you haven't watched it, please do. He's the head of education. He's taken our work to the next level. He's also a trained psychotherapist. I met him on my therapy course by chance. And he has been very clear about the ways in which we must engage with the boys, which is to meet them with compassion and kindness and empathy. Because if we don't, if we start to blame them, if we start to shame them, they will immediately switch off from this discourse. And I recently had pushback from a school where I did the introductory talk to them, like a CPD session, and a couple of female staff members were troubled by the concept of us saying as an organization that when we're talking about misogyny, when we're talking about the manosphere, the online pressures, when we're talking about the behaviors that boys are exhibiting, we need to meet them with an understanding and a compassion and an empathy for why they're exhibiting those behaviors. To which the response was from those two teachers, well, if we're meeting boys with empathy and compassion, that means we're not holding them to account. To which my response is, what are we holding 14-year-old boys accountable for? 14-year-old boys are not to blame for the behavior of 14-year-old boys. The behavior of 14-year-old boys is a reflection upon the society that surrounds them. And it's that we need to focus on, not the individual boy's behavior. And it's very much when we're talking about the manosphere is not the problem. The manosphere is a symptom of the problem. Because what we talk about, we don't use the term toxic masculinity. I hope nobody in this room does or ever will do. We don't use the term healthy or positive masculinity. I know some do. We just talk about masculinity. We talk about what it means to be a man. And we say to those boys that there are behaviors that you exhibit because you feel like they are behaviors that are expected of you. And we don't use toxic masculinity because what we're talking about actually is not toxic masculinity. We're talking about the behaviors, the kind of negative behaviors associated with rigid masculine expectation. It's not as pithy as toxic masculinity, but that is basically what we're talking about. So we are constantly trying to remove the shame and blame away from those boys because that's where we lose them. You know, as a culture, as a society, we talk to these boys about those rigid pressures, about what it means to be a good man versus a man. And we also talk about the fact that actually culturally what we've done is kind of we've scooped out the old ideas of what it means to be a man. Like masculinity is bad, is what.
Chris, can I just interrupt because you
Sure.
broke up when you said, and thank you, this is really, really helpful. You broke up when you said what it takes to be a man. Did you
Okay.
say a good or a bad man? There was something there
No.
and I didn't quite catch it. Forgive
Okay.
me.
So one of our big focuses on the difference between what it means to be a good man and a real man.
Real
and
man. Okay,
and
thank
and
you.
the pressures of both of those, right? And the fact that actually the real man is the kind of easy cultural win because you can pretend to be a real man. And so our focus here is a lot on explaining to the boys that actually we agree with them in many ways. And look, we agree with some of what the online influencers are saying. Of course, not all, and not the underlying misogynistic message, but what these guys are saying is men and boys are struggling right now, and it's true. And what we've done culturally is kind of scooped out all of the old ideals of what it means to be a man, and we haven't replaced them with anything new. And so what happens, if any historians will know what happens in the power vacuum, nefarious characters will creep in. Um, and that's what we're facing right now. And I read the Centre for Social Justice's report, and I think the most stark um, thing that came out of that, the most stark bit of data that came out of that, is that I think it was more 11-year-old boys now have a smartphone than live at home with their father.
Wow. Chris, just hold that thought. I just want to say the three questions just for those online were what messages are you giving to the boys in the schools you visit?
Mm-hmm.
Why are you giving these messages? And are there messages which boys are receiving which you consider unhelpful and harmful, which you've done brilliantly so far? If I may, Natasha, you've got your hand up, so I don't want to miss obviously something is come into mind. So please do come in quickly to Chris. And please just introduce yourself and your constituency when you do it for those on the call as well. Thanks, Natasha.
Thank you, Mims. So I'm Natasha Ryans. I'm the MP for Croydon East, and I'm also the chair of the APPG on Youth Affairs. And Chris, a lot of what you're saying, it makes complete sense and is something, as a mother of two young boys, I totally understand that sense of not trying to, you know, we want our young men to feel positive about being masculine and being male, and it shouldn't be kind of made to feel that in any other of that. But there was something you talked about when you talked about punishment and things like that. I appreciate those sort of things around not kind of punishing a 14-year-old boy for growing up in a community that's sort of perpetuated misogyny. But is there a balance around consequences to your actions? Because taking responsibility for your actions is also about just being a grown-up, isn't it? Whether you're a male or a female. So I was just wondering how you feed that into the whole narrative.
Yeah, and that's a really brilliant point. And when actually, I guess I didn't finish the point earlier, which is like, are we holding the boys accountable? Well, no, but are we helping them to take responsibility for their behaviors? Well, yeah, because what we talk about is, I mean, we're called empath, right? M-path. It was a cheesy play on words I came up with one day that I was really happy with, because actually what we're doing as an organization is trying to teach the boys empathy. We're trying to help them to. I mean, the first workshop we do is called empathy. We do empathy, we do masculinity, we do men's mental health, right? And the empathy bit is telling the boys, well, actually, we understand that you've been brought up to disconnect from your sense of self. So if you've been raised, imagine this: if you've been raised and you've been told from the moment that you could that you're not allowed to experience pain or fear or sorrow, and then suddenly 12, 14 years later, somebody is saying to you, hey, you need to understand how this other person feels. Well, it's an impossible ask. We're asking somebody to do something they can't do, you know. It's like asking, you know, I've spoken in a construction company, and I've said to an electrician, that's like me asking you to go and change a fuse box, and I give you a fish to go and do it with, right? You literally don't have the tools, and then you're blamed and shamed for it. So really, it's not about punishment. In a sense, it's about engaging them with the impact of their behavior. It's the empathy building. So we use tools to do that. We show slides of like adverts and stuff which are about objectification, and then, you know, we are one of the few organizations that has the girls and other genders in the room because it's about empathy building, and we think that's vital. And asking the girls in the room, what does it feel like to see this sort of imagery? But then asking the boys, how do you think that represents you? Does that represent you very well? Well, actually, they say no. And we do anonymous sharing so they can understand their classmates without the shame of actually having to speak up. And actually, what happens is over time, these boys start to recognize, well, actually, I didn't choose this. I didn't choose to be this way. I was automatically opted into this from birth, and nobody has given me the option to opt out. And what we're saying is you can opt out, but we also need the girls to help the boys to opt out. Because like the joke I make to the girls is, how many of you really want a bad boy for a boyfriend, then complain when he treats you like crap? Like it's a joke, but it's to touch on some reality. These boys right now many boys feel like society doesn't care about them. So I don't think we should punish boys for that. I work as a therapist with some incels and a lot of men who are disaffected, because I work only with male clients because I'm a sucker for punishment. And these men are desperate for connection. These men are desperate to be seen and understood, but they live in a culture that they don't feel like wants to, and they don't feel like they're able to speak up and show themselves. So we're setting them up for failure so much, and I am so sad for them. And that's where we cannot. And I know the final question is, any messages the boys are receiving I consider unhelpful or harmful. Anything that goes anywhere near blaming a 14-year-old boy for behaving the way that he does is pushing that boy further and further and further away, right?
Can you build on the? Sorry, you were just coming. I'm just going to ask a question about the mentorship, because you mentioned the smartphone, but not necessarily the male role model or the father or father figure. I'm guessing that is where the harmful messages are not getting anything else to be played back to elsewhere.
Well, I mean, it's multiple edge too, yes, because also there's plenty of dads out there who aren't giving positive messaging. There's plenty of mums out there who are fantastic single mums or same-sex parent families. Just as much as there are, you know, as I often make the joke to my clients, the children of therapists are often the most fucked up of all. So like, it's not necessarily specifically about that, but it is about where do these boys see emotionally available, but also still in their maleness, in their masculinity, where do they see these men? And unfortunately, as a culture, we don't promote that ideal very much. I'm a Man United fan, no jokes please, and Marcus Rashford was trying to feed school children, and all we did as a culture was say, you should be kicking a ball into a net rather than feeding school children. And it was appalling how he was treated for that. And so the boys don't. Again, a man with prestige in our society has a chance to alter perception of what it can mean to be a man, and we say no. So yes, it's about fatherhood. It's about male role models in schools, but it's about an entire societal shift, which, again, to the women in the room, when I'm speaking, in what I say is, because the first question from the women in the room is usually, what can we do as women or girls? And I say, well, the only thing you can do is be patient, because we're trying to undo generations worth of programming overnight. and that's not realistic. It is not going to happen. It is going to take decades, just as I have a poster of Emmeline Pankhurst on my wall, just as that was, that was a century ago. It takes time. And we're at the very early stages of this, and we have to be patient. And
I'm just going to butt in and say you've got 1 minute till we have to switch speakers. And
okay,
people
Rebecca has a question.
Hold their longer questions until the end.
Rebecca, if you've got a short one, otherwise I can wait till the end.
Yeah, I was just going to ask, because you've spoken a lot about engagement, obviously with the boys in school, with girls in school, with teachers, and you talked about parents. But I wondered what engagement your organisation actually has talking to parents in school. But maybe that's a question for everybody at the end. So I'll leave that. Apologies.
Okay. We do work with parents, so that is something that we can offer too. But yeah, just to wrap up, clearly this is, the fact that we're here doing this to someone who's been doing it as long as me is mind-blowing. My colleague Will was just meeting Keir Starmer. It's like, yes, finally. This is just starting. This is going to take a long time, and it's going to take efforts of brilliant people, like all of the people involved here. And it's not just one message. My message is one message of multiple, and mine is not the right message. There are lots and lots of good messages out there and great organizations doing this. And the more that we can promote those and triumph the work that they're doing, the more impact we have to meet that kind of we have to overtake the messaging online, and that's going to take a long time to do.
Thank you, Chris.